and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. Israel's aerial bombing of Gaza continues for the 9th consecutive day. Medics say 212 Palestinians, including 61 children, have been martyred in the Israeli aggression so far. The recent strikes also damaged the building of the Gaza Health Ministry. The Israeli military said it has also shelled Lebanon, accusing it of launching 6 rockets which fell short of crossing the border. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden has expressed his support for a ceasefire in a phone call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has offered to hold intra-Afghan talks. In a phone call with Afghan National Security Advisor Hamdullah Mohib, Wang Yi stressed that Beijing supports an Afghan-led and Afghan-owned peace process. The Chinese Foreign Minister said U.S. decision to pull out has caused uncertainty in Kabul. The U.S. has expressed concern with the recent military tensions between Armenia and Azerbaijan. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan raised the issue in calls with Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and Azeri President Ilham Aliyev. He underscored the need for both countries to conduct formal talks to demarcate their international border. India has registered record 4,329 COVID-19 deaths and more than 263,000 infections over the past 24 hours. In Pakistan, 135 people lost their life to the virus and more than 2,500 tested positive overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.38 million lives and infected over 163 million people so far. Well, those were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the news in detail. Israel's aerial bombing of Gaza continues for the 9th consecutive day. Medics say 212 Palestinians, including 61 children, have been martyred in the Israeli aggression so far. More in this report. Israel is making a mockery of human rights and international calls for peace as it continues to bomb Gaza. In its genocidal spree, Israeli forces have targeted religious sanctuaries, residential areas, media houses, hospitals, refugee camps, even schools and orphanages. Israel killed 2 Palestinians and injured 10 others in an airstrike that hit the Qatari Red Crescent Society office in Gaza. The recent strikes also damaged the building of the Gaza Health Ministry. Gaza's officials say the electricity and water supplies have been knocked out by Israeli bombs in the blockaded strip. Meanwhile, the only coronavirus testing lab in Gaza has also been destroyed in an Israeli airstrike.
We are extremely worried by the situation. The intensity, the violence has been very harsh, has been very heartbreaking to see, especially during this Eid al-Fitr time. So we would like to reiterate to the parties the importance of respecting IHL, international humanitarian law.
The Israeli military said it has shelled Lebanon, accusing it of launching 6 rockets, which fell short of crossing the border. Amnesty International has condemned U.S. plans to sell weapons worth $735 million to Israel in the midst of assaults on Palestine. Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif slammed the move, saying U.S. grant is helping Israel kill more Palestinian children with more precision. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden has expressed his support for a ceasefire in a phone call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says he has not seen any evidence provided by Israel on suggestions that Hamas was operating out of a building that was housing media outlets.
I think President Biden and other members of the administration have raised directly our concerns with our Israeli counterparts about the safety and security of journalists operating in Gaza. And we have stressed the need for their protection.
Despite evidence of Israel's war crimes, international human rights champions have been able to do little to defend the rights of Palestinians. Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki has once again urged the UN to stop Israel's crimes against children. The UN Security Council is set to convene today for a fourth time to discuss Israel-Gaza conflict. However, the apartheid regime has vowed to continue strikes against the innocent Palestinians. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has arrived in Turkey to discuss Gaza's fast deteriorating situation. His extensive diplomatic mission aims to draw global attention to Palestine's crisis. Qureshi will later leave for New York with the foreign ministers of Sudan, Palestine and Turkey. Pakistan's Foreign Office says Qureshi will hold important meetings with various dignitaries in New York. The foreign minister will address an emergency session of the UN General Assembly to reaffirm Pakistan's support for Palestinians. Qureshi will also talk to international media and present Islamabad's stance over the situation in Palestine. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has offered to host the intra-Afghan talks. Wang was speaking to Afghan National Security Advisor Hamdullah Mohib on a phone call. Wang said Beijing is willing to create necessary conditions for holding the talks in China. He added Beijing supports an Afghan-led and Afghan-owned peace process. The Chinese foreign minister said U.S. decision to pull out has caused uncertainty in Kabul. But he said peace is a general trend and the common aspiration of the international community. A UN General Assembly vote on a draft calling for suspension of arms and ammunition supplied to Myanmar has been postponed. Diplomats said the process has been delayed in a bid to win more support. The draft resolution calls on the Myanmar military to end violence and accept the results of the November elections. Meanwhile, pro-democracy activists have taken to streets in different parts of Mandalay despite heavy presence of security forces. The locals also rallied against the military regime in the country's Sagaing region. More than 800 people have been killed since the military seized power on the 1st of February. India has reported record 4,329 cases in the past 24 hours. The number of coronavirus cases in the country has also crossed the 25 million mark, with 263,000 testing positive overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3.38 million lives and infected 163 million people so far. Details in the following report. India has become the second country in the world to have reported 25 million COVID-19 cases after the US. But owing to inadequate testing and lapses in data gathering, the crisis is severely underreported, with many deaths attributed to other causes. The World Health Organization says India now accounts for 50% of daily COVID-19 cases and 30% of daily deaths across the globe. Meanwhile, the capital New Delhi has just 4 days' worth of vaccines left. And India's Medical Association says the country has lost 269 doctors over the past 2 months. The crisis has now penetrated the rural areas, home to nearly 70% of India's 1.3 billion population.
If COVID-19 spreads completely in the villages, then no hospital in India can accommodate them because the rural population is very large and the healthcare is fragile. We have to increase testing in the villages, and if the patients could be identified in the beginning and are provided proper treatment, then the pandemic could be prevented from spreading in rural India.
A new study has found that COVID-19 vaccines tend to alleviate the symptoms of long COVID. Over in Europe, Germany has announced to scrap its vaccine priority list and start offering jabs to all adults from 7 June. Meanwhile, experts worry that Venezuela's low rate of vaccination means it could take up to 10 years to vaccine the population. This comes as the WHO warns that the world has now reached a situation of vaccine apartheid.
I think I would go one step further and say not just that the world is at risk of vaccine apartheid, the world is in vaccine apartheid. As you know, high-income countries account for 15% of the world's population, but have 45% of the world's vaccines. And low and lower middle-income countries account for almost half of the world's population, but have received just 17% of the world's vaccines. So the gap is really huge.
In Japan, a top medical organization has thrown its weight behind calls to cancel the Tokyo Olympics, saying hospitals are already overwhelmed. Meanwhile, Thailand has reported its highest surge in daily deaths since the pandemic began. In Pakistan, 135 more people have lost their lives to the coronavirus in the past 24 hours. The country's death toll has risen to 19,752. The Health Ministry has reported another 2,500 cases overnight. Pakistan's caseload is now approaching 883,000. Meanwhile, over 795,000 people have recovered from the disease so far. Health officials say the number of active cases has declined to 67,000. The country's positivity ratio stands at 8.6%. In India, some 127 people are missing after a vessel adrift off Mumbai's coast sank during Cyclone Tauktae. The Indian Navy said 2 ships and helicopters have been deployed to assist in the search. Reportedly, the vessel was carrying over 270 people when strong winds sent adrift. But authorities say Tauktae has now weakened after slamming into the eastern coastal state of Gujarat. India's meteorological agency has classified down the storm as very severe, with sustained wind speeds of up to 160 kilometers per hour. So far, 16 people have been killed by the havoc wreaked by the storm, while 200,000 have been forced to evacuate. Saudi Arabia's King Salman bin Abdulaziz has voiced support for Sudan to help it reduce its debt burden owed to the IMF. In a report, Saudi press agency said Riyadh stressed the importance of enhancing investments in Sudan. Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan chaired a delegation participating at a summit in Paris to promote debt relief and investment in Sudan. Meanwhile, the US, Britain and France also agreed to clear Sudan's arrears to the IMF. French President Emmanuel Macron said he supports a full and simple cancellation of Sudan's $5 billion debt. He said the IMF may confirm the move in June. The debt cancellation is considered as a reward for Sudan to normalize ties with Israel. The US has expressed concern over the recent military tensions between Armenia and Azerbaijan. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan raised the issue in calls with Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and Azeri President Ilham Aliyev. The State Department says Sullivan emphasized that military movements near undemarcated borders are provocative. Sullivan welcomed ongoing communication between the two sides to resolve this issue peacefully. He underscored the need for the two countries to conduct formal talks to demarcate their international border. Sullivan also conveyed U.S. commitment to peace, security and prosperity in the South Caucasus. More news stories coming up after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. The International Criminal Court has warned mercenaries and foreign troops in Libya that they could face prosecution for their crimes. Court's chief prosecutor has demanded an end to the detention centers allegedly used for committing crimes in Libya. Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda addressed a virtual meeting of the UN Security Council on Libya. Bensouda said the office has collected credible information and evidence on such criminal activities. She noted crimes committed on Libyan territory may fall under court's jurisdiction, no matter the nationality of the persons involved. Meanwhile, the UK welcomed prosecutors' foreigners' withdrawal, called and endorsed that the court has jurisdiction over this matter. About 5,000 migrants from Morocco illegally swam into Spain's northern African enclave of Ceuta. The Spanish government says one migrant had died in the attempt. Madrid says the migrants mostly include young people, 1,500 minors, and many families trying to reach Europe. Foreign Minister Arantxa Gonzalez says Spain is keeping calm over the influx and sending them back to Morocco. Gonzalez said the Spanish and Moroccan governments are in touch over the matter. Spanish authorities say they will also increase security presence in the area after the huge migrant influx. The UN has called for international support for hundreds of thousands of Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. The head of the refugee agency says the fate of Rohingya was at risk in the wake of a coup by Myanmar's junta. Speaking to the media, Filippo Grandi said the crisis will continue unless it is addressed both in Bangladesh and Myanmar. The UNHCR will launch an appeal on Tuesday to raise $943 million to support humanitarian work. The U.S. Senate has voted to debate on a bill that would provide billions of dollars for technology research to compete with China. Senators voted 86-11 to move forward on the Endless Frontier Act, which is the base for the larger China bill. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer called the bill a once-in-a-generation investment in American science and technology. He said the U.S. needs to lead in artificial intelligence, 5G, and quantum computing before China determines rules for the sector. The bill includes $2 billion to boost semiconductor production and research for the auto and defense sector. A group of senators is also working on a measure to include $52 billion for microchips. Other China-related bills are likely to be included in a final package. The European Union has extended sanctions against 8 individuals, including Russians, over their alleged involvement in cyber attacks. The curbs also apply to 4 entities and have been prolonged until the 18th of May 2022. In a statement, Brussels said the sanctions include a travel ban and asset freeze. It said European persons and entities are forbidden from making funds available to those listed. The EU first introduced such sanctions to curb cyber attacks on June 30 last year against Russia, China, and North Korea. The European Union has drafted a new deal to facilitate the entry and residence of highly skilled non-EU workers. The draft deal between the European Parliament and Council aims to revamp the 2009 Blue Card work permit system. The deal will see the required salary threshold lowered and reduce the minimum duration of a work contract. It also introduces enhanced rights and the possibility to move and work more easily between member states. The European Parliament and Council still need to confirm the deal by adopting the new Blue Card scheme. Member states will then have 2 years to implement the measures into national law. Russia has partially halted a slowdown of Twitter after it deleted a large portion of content deemed illegal by Moscow. Russian media watchdog Roxomanadzor said Twitter had removed 91% of the banned content since March. Moscow said it no longer planned to block the service and the slowdown would only remain on mobile devices. The watchdog said other platforms, including Facebook and YouTube, have also posted illegal material. A Twitter spokesperson welcomed the decision not to block its service. Shares in the Asia-Pacific are trading higher as investors react to the release of Japan's first quarter gross domestic data. Japan's Nikkei 225 is leading the gains, jumping over 2%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index and South Korea's Kospi have ascended over 1%. Mainland Chinese shares have edged up marginally, while the ASX 200 in Australia has gained close to 1%. The World Economic Forum has cancelled its annual meeting due to be held in Singapore this August. Organizers say it is not possible to hold such a large event as planned because of COVID-19. In a statement, Singapore's Trade Ministry said it fully appreciates the challenges caused by the ongoing pandemic. The event, which attracts VIPs from the worlds of politics and business, has been held since 1971. It was shifted from the Swiss Alpine resort of Davos in December over concerns about the health of participants. The WEF's next annual meeting will instead take place in the first half of 2022. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.